have a very simple slide to show you because I'm a very simple person, delivering very simple work in my local community. My name is Clare Jefferies and my colleague Lynn James is my care manager at Home Instead. Home Instead now has 30, I believe, outstanding ratings by the CQC. I think that deserves a round of applause to start with. My own simple little business in Wimbledon and Kingston was the first to be rated outstanding by the CQC in London, and I'm delighted that 2 years later the CQC came back and rated us outstanding for a second time with a better rating than the first. That's something quite extraordinary, but what we don't do is we don't live, as Andrea said, we don't live for the inspection and the inspector to come round. We live every single day as if we were providing the best care that we possibly can. I have 165 people working for me, and we deliver care to around 200 clients in my local area. Around half of those have got some form of dementia or cognitive decline. So every single day, we are working with people in the community. We are working with people in their homes to help them live well with dementia. Providing care at home and owning a care company is not for the faint-hearted. It's a really, really difficult emotional journey every single day to be part of. Put your hands up if you're a carer or you've experienced living or working or helping somebody who has got dementia. It's tough, isn't it? It's a really, really tough thing to witness. It's a tough thing to experience yourself, and we're doing it every day. Lynn used to work for the Alzheimer's Society. She was 15 years there, so I brought her on board 3 years ago because I really wanted to make a difference to people living with dementia in their homes. I'm not an expert. I don't come from a nursing background. I was somebody who experienced poor care from my own parents. They both died 7 months apart. And the type of care that I saw delivered to my parents was all wrong. It was wrong because it was delivered by people who didn't care, people who didn't understand the conditions that both my parents had. And so I went into this to make a difference. And by getting an outstanding, we think we're making a difference in our local area. I just want to share with you, first of all, how we look at the clients that we care for. When you ring my office tomorrow, you'll speak to Lynn or Joe, my care managers, and the first thing they will say to you, come round, they want to know who you are. Here she is. Here she is, she's here. The first thing that Lynn will ask you is, tell me about mum, or tell me about your wife. Tell me about your husband. And then she will listen to the outpouring of emotion that that person is telling us because they've made that decision to pick up the phone and ask for help. Those 3 ladies at the top could potentially all have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. But every single one of those 3 ladies is experiencing Alzheimer's in a completely different way. When I asked one of our caregivers, we call them caregivers at Home Instead, when I asked one of our caregivers, what's it like looking after Sheila as opposed to looking after Penny, 2 ladies who've both got Alzheimer's? And she said to me, when Penny's upset, I hug her. When Sheila's upset, I step away. It's about understanding the person that we're looking after. So who is Betty? I always use Betty, I don't know why, it's just a name. Apologies if your name is Betty in the room, but I always use Betty as an example. Who is Betty? That's the first question we ask. Who is Betty? Not what dementia does Betty have? What diagnosis does she have? Because actually, regardless of the diagnosis, Betty is still Betty. Betty was, as we asked her, a civil servant, as she called herself. We actually found out that she was a spy. She didn't want to tell anybody that. Her and her husband, she worked at Bletchley Park as a code breaker and her husband was in MI6. She had an incredible, incredible life. So the questions we ask is, who is the person that we're caring for? Betty likes a drink. Don't we all? Betty likes a drink, and the daughter said to us, please, can you stop my mother from drinking? Well, we'll give it a go. But actually, Betty's been drinking for 20 years, since she lost her husband. So the chances of us helping Betty stop drinking is probably going to be very difficult, but we can help Betty with the sherry that she has for breakfast, with the whiskey that she has at lunch, and we can make sure that we get her into bed in the evening. We all know that there's no place like home, and they say that the best place for somebody is to be at home with their dementia. That's where the memories are. The piano that doesn't get played. In Betty's mind, she can still see her daughter playing that piano when she was 6 or 7. We try very hard to make that place a safe place for Betty to remain living in. And what we're trying to do, and we're up against a background constantly of news, stories on the television of the poor care. We get phone calls from people saying mum's had 2, 3, 4 different care companies, all delivering care that's not right. Why? Because it's rushed, it's 15 minutes, it's half an hour, it's a different person. How on earth is Betty going to get through her world if there are different people coming to her home every single day? So when Lynn is going out to meet our clients, Lynn is up against resistance often from the husbands and wives saying, I don't need care. I'm not at that point where I need care at the moment. My husband looks after me. All that we have to deal with on a daily basis. So what we do, and what we do very, very well, is we put continuity of care in place. It's a word, it's something like person-centred care. It's banded around all the time, continuity of care. What does that mean? It means putting one person or a team of people into a client so that they know who's coming. They can build a relationship, they can build a trust. So actually you know that Fred is capable of eating his lunch by himself if it's on the right plate, at the table, at the right time. If you've got different people coming in all the time, you're never, ever going to help support somebody at home. By preventing hospital admissions makes a huge difference to our local hospital, but we can only do that if we understand the client, if we understand that actually when we go in the morning, she's not up and dressed when she normally is. Why is that? Don't know. But actually something's not quite right. So maybe a phone call to the GP to say, could somebody come around and just have a quick look? Maybe she's dehydrated, maybe she's got a UTI. We're not nurses, we're not experts. We know our clients, so we understand that actually something's not quite right. Living well at home with dementia. It's all about routine. If your world is very, very confusing, it's very important to try and put some structure in place so that there's an understanding of what's happening during the day. Involving people in the community. 2014, a daughter said to me, where can I take my mum? She's got dementia. She's very inappropriate often with some of the things that she says. And actually, I don't feel comfortable going into public places with her. Where can I take her? And I had a little look around my local area and I said, you know what, I don't think there is anywhere. So it came to mind, maybe I should create an environment where that lady could bring her mother. And so I set up our first memory cafe in our local area. Not funded by the local authority, funded by me, because I made a difference to that lady's life by allowing her to bring her mother to somewhere that she felt safe in. We now run 11 different events in our local community, because there isn't the funding in our community to be able to do so. So we have gentlemen's club, lunch clubs, because a daughter said to me, my dad misses going to the pub. So we laid on some sort of event where he could come to the pub and have a pint and be normal, be a human being again. Familiarity is very important, as you all know, so to be able to provide these environments where people feel safe makes a big difference. And the fact that somebody can remain independent in their own homes, understanding what it is that they're capable of doing them themselves, allowing them to still be part of the community that they always were involved in by taking them to the places that we know will make a difference to them. Offering somebody self-worth as well. Just because they've got dementia, as it's been said earlier on today, it doesn't mean they're not the person that they were before. They still need to be valued in society. And also their position in their family Just because he's got dementia, he's still dad. He's still the husband. He's still that very important man. And everything that we do is trying to reflect the person, not the diagnosis. Take him out of the box, strip away the diagnosis and look at the person. We hear this all the time. I didn't sign up for this. It's a very difficult thing to accept, to watch your husband or to watch your wife experiencing dementia. And often we have those awful conversations with the wife who says, I'm at breaking point, I don't know what to do. So it's about offering some sort of respite care that we can to allow the wife or the husband to still have a life themselves. And then we're up against the challenge of, but it's my job. I'm his wife. That's what I've always done. And yet they're struggling themselves, possibly with comorbidity. They've got their own problems. We had one couple, she was blind and he had dementia. And they helped each other cross the road. God forbid. You may laugh, but actually that was a reality that they were experiencing every day. And then you've got those amazing people who live next door. If you've got a good neighbour, God, love them. They ring us up and say, look, it's none of my business, but actually, he's struggling. I don't know what to do with him. Can you help? And so we're there to listen. We're there to try and understand what it is that can make a difference to that person's life. Lynn speaks to so many people on a daily basis. I wanted her to just share with you a couple of examples before lunch. It's just out there, where she can really tell you about how we've made a difference to somebody living at home. Lynn, do you want to have a quick word?
So Claire's mentioned the factors that lead to quality care, and as Claire said, I'm just going to give one example actually of how this actually works in practice at home instead. So I want to introduce you to Susan. Susan's a 69-year-old lady living on her own in the home where she brought up 4 boys. The boys are now in their 30s and 40s, all with demanding jobs. And as Claire said, I was the person at the end of the phone where one of the boys rang up and said, I don't know what to do. We've noticed, they were accepting of the diagnosis. Mum had been living relatively independently with some support from them. But they'd noticed their family home was falling into a state of disrepair. They noticed that when they went round every weekend, their mum was wearing the same clothes. They noticed she was losing weight. They didn't really know what was going on with her medication. When I asked, did she have any other health needs? They just didn't know, because she was their mum. She was their mum, and they didn't interfere with her life. She was still the person in charge of that family home. So I went round to see them and was met with some suspiciousness from this lady, from Susan, and be fair to say, a bit of hostility. And we had a very uncomfortable meeting where the son was explaining his concerns to his mum in a very open and honest way, which would be always be our starting point, meeting a new client. She sort of snarled at him and at me and said that he's making it up, he's exaggerating, but I was sitting in this house that was clearly neglected, and Susan herself was looking clearly neglected as well. So we had a chat, and she agreed eventually at my sort of suggestion that, okay, but the boys are worried. Why don't you just do it for them? Why don't you? They want you to have that morning call. Why don't we come in, see how it goes, la, la, la. So that's what we did. So 18 months later, Susan's still living in that home. She's still the head of the family, and she still hosts the family gatherings at the weekends where the grandchildren come along and the family, and they bring their own food, but she's still at home. That was at risk. That situation was at real risk when I first met them, because her health needs were such, and her lack of insight was such, that she would have probably needed assessment by the mental health team, because she was at risk herself. So how did we do it? How have we kept Susan at home for the last 18 months? The key, I think, and Claire's going to mention this as well, is about recruitment. It was mentioned this morning about those wonderful, wonderful caregivers who are out there, often with little training, and are doing a good job. So when we recruit our caregivers, our first question is, why do you want to do this job? And I think you mentioned earlier, it's about attitude. We want people who really care, who really want to make a difference. But establishing a trusting relationship was absolute key to the success. We matched Susan with a local caregiver who also had 3 boys herself, and they bonded over this boy bringing up situation, as well as their love of dogs, and they were both smokers, both knowing that they should be giving up really. So Rebecca visited at the same time every weekday morning, and was often met with, "Oh, I've just had breakfast, I've just had a bath, thank you very much." So over time, and because Rebecca, we do train our caregivers in dementia, but also it's not just the one-off train, I think as you were mentioning, it's that ongoing reflective practice that Rebecca had us at the office to come and talk to say, she's not going for it, I'm not really getting anywhere in terms of the tasks, addressing the health needs that are influencing her ability to stay at home. So Rebecca had a toolkit of approaches, and what we found works is that Rebecca will ask, "Oh, can I just use your loo?" when she arrives. She'll go upstairs and she'll run a bath. And when she comes down in a very friendly way, she'll say, "Oh, Sue, don't let your bath get cold." And Sue goes up and has her bath. In the meantime, Rebecca's made some breakfast for them because she's found that Susan eats much better when they're sitting having a cup of tea and toast together. It's much more normal, isn't it, than someone standing over you, watching you. And how hard is it to walk into someone's house, put their kettle on and put the toast in the toaster, unless you had a relationship with that person and you've sort of worked out what works best. You can't do that. And as Claire said, people going in and out, they wouldn't know that. They wouldn't know that about Sue. The other thing about eating was that if food was the original remit, was leave a sandwich in the fridge, by Rebecca going in the next day, she notices that hasn't been eaten. So she puts a sandwich on the table. Still not eaten. She now puts a post-it note on it to say, "Sue, this is for you. It's eaten." And this sounds really straightforward. It sounds like absolute common sense. But the key is that relationship, the consistency, the continuity, the routine. Without that, none of that would have happened. And Sue's health needs that were influencing her ability, negatively influencing her ability to stay at home, have now all been met. So it works. They also, in their spare time, go up to the common to watch the dogs, and they go to Sainsbury's as well. So it's not all about tasks, but the tasks that need to be done are being done. So that's how it works for us.
Thank you, Lynn. And that's just one example of a number of clients that we look at differently, I think, to traditional care at home. We have one lady who has young onset dementia, and she was a big traveller. And so one of our caregivers actually took her to the airport and allowed her to sit and watch the planes, allowed her to actually experience what it's like to be at the airport again. It's about thinking about that person. It's been touched on a lot, but in order to provide the best care you possibly can to somebody, it's all about the recruitment. It's all about the training, and it's all about the support of the people who are providing that care in the home. As I said, it's not for the faint-hearted. To be somebody who is walking through a door of somebody with dementia, they do not know what they are going to experience when that door opens. Is it going to be the vase being flung at them, or are they going to have somebody in tears, or are they going to receive a big hug? Will they walk into somebody who's completely naked? All these things could happen, and we need to prepare our staff to ensure that they know that they can get support from us to deal with any situation that they're put into. We recognise that our caregivers are as vulnerable as the clients that they care for, so we need to make sure that we're providing that support to them. Lastly, it's all about time. It's about time to hold a hand. It's about time to listen. It's about time to navigate somebody's way through the pathway of dementia. We talked earlier on about working towards dementia-friendly communities. I live in a borough that's just been rated working towards a dementia-friendly community. However, I am working on a project at the moment myself. I've not been commissioned to do it. And I'm working on it because of Betty, to try and understand what it's like to experience the pathway of care in my local community. It's a minefield, because you start off here at the GP, then you go for an assessment at this hospital, and then if you're going to have a scan, you've got to go to another hospital, and you get a letter sent to you. So if you've got a bit of dementia, no one follows up with you that actually, have you received the letter? Have you got the date in your diary to come to that appointment? It's a minefield. So I do challenge anybody that can, please look at the dementia pathway for somebody and make it easier. And one last thing to leave you with. If you know anybody that's experiencing poor care at home, you need to shout about it, because too many people are too nervous to do anything about it because they're in fear of that care being stopped. If we don't do anything about it, then that care will continue, and that's no good for anybody. Thank you very much.